when we think back to the Greco-Roman histories, they envision all these monstrous gods and goddesses.
And that was not imagination.
And it was not their imagination?
No, it was not.
Go take that idea a little further.
Well, my specialty is Greek and the ancient world. And in the ancient world, people think, they just had overactive imaginations. No. They were closer to these events, and they remembered these events. And the ancient world created logic, philosophy, geometry. They created structures which to this day we don't know how they built. These were people who were brilliant. They were brilliant. And they built temples all over the ancient world to these fallen deities because they believed they were real. They remembered those events. And if you study ancient mythology, all of it talks about demigods. A demigod was half angel, half human, half god, half human. And these were real creatures that roamed the earth in the days before the flood.
To use a New Testament example, there's the story about Diana of the Ephesians.
Correct.
And then the Apostle
That's
Paul.
right.
And Diana of the Ephesians was a beautiful statue, huge, and the temple. I've read about how the temple was built. And Paul came head to head with that system of thought.
That's correct.
And it was something that he understood as having resulted from the fall of man.
And not only that, but when you read Peter, 2 Peter chapter 2, Peter describes these angels that left their first estate and did the unthinkable. It's very clearly described. Jude describes it. Jude was the half-brother of Jesus, which means the family of Jesus believed these events were real. Jesus grew up hearing this story, probably because the book of Enoch was the most popular book being read by the Jewish people in the first century. Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing.
Then it disappeared from history until about 1773. It reappeared in Ethiopia, and then they found great portions of it in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and everybody realized, wow, the book of Enoch is real. And Jude quoted from it. And Jude talks about that moment when the angels left their first estate, rebelled against God, did the unthinkable with women, and God put them in chains of darkness. Now that's amazing, because angels are made to be creatures of movement, and God put those rebellious angels in chains so they couldn't move. Angels are creatures of light. God put them in darkness. It was the most severe punishment for those angels. And the Bible tells us in Peter and Jude, they're held there until the time of the great judgment. And in Greek, the word judgment is the word crisis. That's literally the pronunciation of the Greek word. It will be the greatest crisis imaginable for those angels that sinned in the days before the flood.
And so to study that period gives us insight into what's happening right now.
That is correct.
And by the way, having gone through your book, I haven't fully read it, but I have read the highlights at this point in time, just so I'd be a bit prepared for the conversation I'm having with you. And I have to tell you that I had a dozen ideas flash across my mind as I looked at your manuscript, because it just reminded me of things that I don't often think about. And suddenly it all pops into focus.
There's some people who even believe there's going to be the reappearance of Nephilim in the period between now and the coming of Jesus. I can't say that. But I do believe we're going to see monstrous things. Monstrous things. We already are.
Already are.
Transgenderism.
Yeah.
Transhumanism. We're violating boundaries that were never supposed to be violated. And many people are doing it just to find out if we can do it.
Well, and you see the pictures of the UAPs on television.
Yes.
Being chased by jet fighters.
They're real.
And they're real. And then you hear stories and whole books written about people who have been, quote unquote, abducted. That's the word.
Right.
And when you get abducted, you're up there among these supposed space creatures from another galaxy or what.
Or interdimensional, maybe.
Yeah, maybe interdimensional. And what do? They seem to be tampering with the human genome.
That's
a lot of the time.
They're trying to interfere with the human DNA.
Which takes us right back to the era before Noah and the
That's
flood.
right. And the Bible tells us that Noah was blameless in his generation. And that word blameless most likely has to do with the fact that his DNA had not been messed with. And it shows us how widespread this corruption was in the world before the flood. It looks like Noah and his family were the only family that was still pure. It was a remnant. Now, Gary, there's another word that's important. It was a remnant. Do you know in 1 Thessalonians 4, when the Apostle Paul talks about the rapture of the church, now I read Greek, he says, those that are alive and remain. And when you read that in the Greek text, it is verbatim in Greek, repeated twice in 2 verses. Those who are alive and remain. Those who are alive. I always thought that meant those that are still alive when Jesus comes. But the Greek word really means those that are still robust. And remain, the word remain, is the Greek word for a remnant. And it seems to imply at the coming of the Lord, there's going to be a remnant that is still spiritually robust. And that explains why Jesus said, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? There's going to be a fake church. There's going to be a real church. But the real church may be a lot smaller than what we have thought. But they're going to be caught up to meet the Lord in the air. It's going to be a divine rescue operation.
Wow. You add dimension to what we all know. All of us who have looked at the church age and looked at the manuscripts that came out of Paul and John and Peter and people who couldn't possibly have written a manuscript like that unless they had been led of the Lord.
That's right.
And you read about all these things and you try all your life to put them together so that they really make sense. So I want to be in the will of God. I want to do what he wants me to do. And then you read the Bible, and we've all had this experience, I think, and say, there's no way I can understand this. This is far above me. And then suddenly you go back, as you have done in this book, and you look at an era in which mankind is challenged. And God reacts by sending a flood. And then post-flood, man is told to go forth, multiply. And we have the story of the redemption of man in spite of everything that the fallen ones attempted to do.
That's correct.
And you capture that so well in this book.
This book pulled it all together for me. I started writing this book because I saw a video of what was allegedly the ruins of Noah's Ark, and I didn't believe it. I thought it was silly.
Yeah.
But I studied and studied until finally I got my whole camera crew together, and we went to the eastern mountains of Ararat to look at it myself. And when I got there, Gary, my skepticism just evaporated. The ruins of Noah's Ark are really laying on Mount Judy, and that mountain from ancient times was called the place of the descent.
There it is.
Is that amazing?
It is amazing.
And do you know, those ruins of Noah's Ark appeared for the first time in thousands of years because of an earthquake in May 1948. Well, what else happened in May 1948?
May 1940. Wow.
Israel.
What
Israel reappeared.
Has to be a coincidence.
So the ark reappeared, Israel reappeared. These are two end-time phenomena. God saying the end of the age is right in front of you. And of course, look what's happening in Israel today. But in the days before the flood, Noah was building that ark, and we know from 2 Peter 2:8, he was a preacher of righteousness. He was telling people what was coming. They ignored him. They mocked him. Well, Peter says, you'll know when you've sailed to the end of the age, because there will be mockers who will say, where is the promise of his coming? It is a repeat. And people today are mocking people like us. They're saying, oh, come on, this rapture business is crazy. They've been talking about this for 2,000 years. They themselves are a sign that we've come to the end of the age.
And the demigods are making another appearance, just as they did in the days of Noah.
That's correct.
And that's what the Bible says, as it was in the days of Noah.
That's correct.
And you have to say, wait a minute, is that really true? Well, I guess it is.